Welcome to my documentary. I'll be covering the stress of slaves before escaping, during escaping, and after, with also a bonus focus on the stress after even the emancipation of slavery, the abolishment, I guess. I chose this topic because I believe this is some of the most interesting stuff due to the bravery and the action and the putting your life on the line. I feel like I knew pretty good amount of information, but I learned mainly about the individuals shown in this, such as Harriet Jacobs, who wrote Incidents of the Life of a Slave Girl. Harriet was abused sexually, and her children were put as blackmail to get her to do these things. Many other enslaved people were also prompted to escape because of their cruel masters, such as Frederick Douglass. The narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, an American slave who ran by himself. Douglass gets sick, and because of this, he cannot work. And the breaker he was at the time, then beat him and kicked him repeatedly, and he almost died. He then had to crawl and walk many miles to get to his original, or I guess his still master or owner, and he said he would have died if the blood coming out of his head did not mat up his hair and stop the blood from coming out, which is just really insane. And obviously there's a lot of stress that goes even behind that, with it not just being that, it's having to work insane hours, being beaten often, and just being treated as lower than human. And this stress gets to the point where slaves are willing to escape or die trying, and shown in 5 Daring Slave Escapes by Andrew Evans. See, there's some more interesting ones in here, where Henry Box Brown mailed himself to Philadelphia, and he almost died because he was flipped upside down for 27. He was in the box for 27 hours, and he was upside down for the majority of it, and was luckily flipped over eventually. Frederick Douglass and Robert Smalls escaped via boat, not together, just they both escaped via boat. Douglass used disguise, dressing up as a sailor, Douglass being the person we talked about prior, and used a fake ID, and was able to go along on the boat. And Robert Smalls stole the boat along with other slaves while their masters were away, and they sailed that boat up north to get themselves out. Harriet Jacobs, also talked about prior, left the plantation and hid in her grandmother's attic, a free person, for 7 years. And during this, she missed her kids immensely, and her family was even put in jail to get her to come back. And obviously, everybody misses their family, but I don't think anybody can imagine not seeing their family for 7 years, and especially not a mother of these relatively young kids. And the final people talked about in this article was William Ellen Craft, who disguised themselves as slave master and slave and attempted to buy a train ticket. They were not able to sign, though, but luckily got passed they were able to go onto the train anyways, and they sat right next to a friend of their slave owner, and they had to sit there through the whole train ride while being worried that they will get caught and then beaten or killed, which must have taken a huge mental toll on them. And even after escaping, it wasn't that much better because of the Fugitive Slave Act. I got this information from an article on History.com and a crash course video made by Clint Smith. The Fugitive Slave Act was a series of acts that allowed for the recapturement of fugitive slaves. These acts put penalties on people who tried to help slaves, and also allowed for slave owners to come to free states and recover slaves. Also put stress on free African Americans who were never slaves, because they could just be captured and there was no consequences for the people capturing them. Fugitive slaves were probably constantly scared of recapture, I have to imagine so, because of all the people lurking around and all those things. And even after the abolishment of slavery, there was still a you could still feel the slavery there and all the stress still caused by it. Like Wilson Wood, who did amazing for himself, and he was talked about in tracking down a slave's bill of sale from APM reports. And he did quite well for himself, but he was only able to buy poor land. Like, land, I believe that is the only reason why he was able to buy land was because it was poor land. The land was by a river, and the land would flood, making the farming much harder. Another African American who was free after the abolishment of slavery was Booker T. Washington. He had to deal with much stress. He lived in poverty and had a lack of education because there was no education at the time. Besides, for this university that he had to travel many cities to, getting denied a hotel while white people got to stay in there, and he had to he stayed outside in the cold all night. And he also had to sleep under a bridge later and work jobs while sleeping under that bridge to get to the next city. He was finally able to get to university, but it all stems from the initial problem of the lack of education and poverty, and then all comes back to slavery. And this information is just amazing to research because it gives you such great examples of perseverance, from Frederick Douglass bleeding and crawling and walking miles to Harriet Jacobs living in an attic for 7 years. Just that number is just so strong. All these amazing feats just put into perspective how much as a society we just put too much pressure on ourselves, too high of expectations, when we are living a easier life. And we should just appreciate that we have that. And while, even in today's world, some people don't. Some people still live as slaves in this world. Not in America, but in other parts. I just believe that there needs to be more appreciation for where we are, and less negativity on the modern day world. That was my documentary. Thank you for listening. That's all.